Mohamed Salah and Ivan Toney bottle penalty kicks. Ollie Watkins scores his ninth goal in 11 matches. Son throws Richarlison to the bench, then scores an all-world goal. Chelsea's season from hell continues. Jordan Ayew rises from the dead and scores a brace. Sean Dyche's doomed formation and another dive. Jesus. Football fans far and wide, welcome to the Football v Football podcast. This is the EPL Gameweek 30 reaction show. We got a great week of games to recap for you here. I want to start by asking if you're watching on YouTube, as always, hit that subscribe button. Would be really appreciated. And if you are listening on Spotify, hit that follow button and rate us. Or if you're listening on any podcast platform, please do the same. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, but we're going to jump into the action of this critical game week 30 in the English Premier League with the first match. Manchester United here at Old Trafford, as you can see in the background if you're watching on YouTube, defeating Everton 2-0. As mentioned, it was a doomed formation by Everton here. It's that 4-4-1-1 with Sims alone up top and Demarai Gray behind him, and then four people behind Gray. You're just begging to score 0 goals with that crap formation, and that's exactly what happened. This is the vestiges of what I remember Norwich did with Pukki, which got them relegated. Just it's a way to kill your offense, and that's exactly what happened in this game. Poor Jordan Pickford, forced into making so many saves here, always an animated guy, even, like when his defense is like playing okay, even though today they weren't, a very sloppy defensive ahead of him. Tarkowski really just saves his effort for headers off of set pieces on offense. I have to admit, the only guy on this team that I really enjoy watching is Demarai Gray. He's tremendous on set pieces. Dwight McNeil sometimes has his moments, but really his play has really deteriorated, even though Sean Dyche is his old guy from Burnley. United had a blown chance in the 12th minute here. Anthony off the post. Then Bissaka couldn't convert an open goal. A few times he could have passed to open teammates, but was selfish and just couldn't convert. And then Sims on Everton, their new star forward apparently, or not star, just their new forward. A few minutes later, had a terrible little dribbler off an attempt on goal, went wide. And then Bruno Fernandes with some beautiful feeds early that just couldn't be converted. And it wasn't until the 36th minute, Scott McTominay, of all people, breaks the deadlock here. A one-timer from a difficult angle. He's been on a very hot streak recently out of nowhere with this goal, and then the one for Scotland against Spain in the Euro qualifying against his own teammate De Gea, who shouldn't be in goal. It should be Raya. But he breaks the deadlock here with a beautiful goal. Scott McTominay. Who remembers that name? I mean, with all these big transfers and big signings from United over the past year or so, McTominay is still in there making plays. And then the second goal for United, the 71st minute, a mistake by Seamus Coleman, then an easy goal by Martial, another guy that, United has so many of these weapons, and they're starting to come back healthy now. And the replay showed in that goal that it could have been offsides in a couple places, but it wasn't called. And Old Trafford here hosted a 2-0 win over Everton, who are now firmly in the relegation zone. They are threatening again for a second year in a row, or maybe a third, to possibly be relegated. And it's a very embarrassing time for them. Their neighbors over there in Liverpool aren't having a great season either. I think they're 9th or 10th, but Everton being this bad, bad news. But meanwhile, Manchester United, I believe they're back into the top 4 at this point, maybe the top 5. doing well, picking up momentum at the time where they really need it. Moving on now to Aston Villa defeating Nottingham Forest 2-0. Forest sitting a lot of their good players, in my opinion. Emmanuel Dennis, Iowini, and Lingard all on the bench. This again was a weird lineup with the 3-5-2 formation. Not a big fan of that. Ollie Watkins had a great chance in the 25th minute. This guy has a nose for the goal the last 11 games. And Traore was the one that broke the deadlock here to begin the second half on a rebound attempt. This is his second goal in as many games, and this was on Jojo Selvey. Really sloppy clearance, directly caused the goal here. And on the Aston Villa side, Emi Martinez barely had any work in this one. It wasn't until the 52nd minute, an attempt by Danilo on Emi Martinez, but barely made him work. And then Danilo again had a shot on goal in the 70th minute. And that was the only effort Forest put on goal, essentially. It was a pathetic offensive display from this team. They've been playing Gibbs White up top the past couple games, but that's not his proper place. He's more well suited as an attacking mid and needs guys like Emmanuel Dennis and Iowini and Brennan Johnson ahead of him. That's his natural spot. That's where he excelled. So if I'm Nottingham Forest, I'm not putting him up top anymore. Move him back, get Emmanuel Dennis in there, get Iowini in there, get Brennan Johnson in space. Then I think you can succeed, because this is a team now that is, I think, in 19th and really threatening to go back down to the second division. And Ollie Watkins, as mentioned earlier, is on a hot streak. Put the game away in the final moment of stoppage time. I believe it was the 94th or 95th minute. And as mentioned earlier, this is his 9th goal in 11 games now. Extremely impressive. I think he's scored in 6 straight away games. What a player. This is a guy that's in the form of his life, really. I mean, he started to come on last year, but he's really, really excelling this year, Ollie Watkins. And good on Aston Villa. I think they play well. I think they have some... Ollie Watkins is a great finisher, and they have a lot of tremendous midfielders. John McGinn, Buendia, guys like Jacob Ramsey, Coutinho when he's healthy. They just have so many great midfielders that are feeding guys like Ollie Watkins, and even now Traore. It's a solid team with a solid goalie as well. So we'll see how they continue to progress as this year goes on. But Nottingham Forest, you got to get Gibbs White back in the midfield and make sure to start Emmanuel Dennis. He's probably the most creative guy on your team, and get Brennan Johnson in some space and get Iowini some minutes as well. Next game, Newcastle defeating Brentford 2-1. And watching this game on the NBC broadcast, it sounded like a child was doing color commentary. I'm not sure if they have any labor laws there. But anyway, getting back to the game here, the 8th minute, you had a great diving save by Nick Pope. But Toney was right there to clean it up. And it should have been the first goal of the game, but then it was overturned by an offside call via VAR. And then moving on to the 27th minute, Sade, and I ain't talking about the singer, the striker for Brentford, who I don't know anything about, made an incredible move to get away from one defender and was going straight for goal. And then Sven Botman just absolutely clattered this guy, just ran right into him. Terrible, terrible contact. It looked more like an American football tackle. And a PK was given, obviously, but it was all for naught, because Ivan Toney missed a very, very weakly taken PK. It's one of those things that you saw way too many of during the World Cup, where you're neither putting power behind it, nor are you burying it in bottom quarters or top corners or just giving any effort. You're just kind of hoping or trying to maneuver the keeper into going to one side and then just softly hitting it, not even to like a side. It's like it's not the center, but it's somewhere between the center and the corner, just kind of midway, and it's just like a perfect spot for the keeper to get it. That's what he did. So it was saved by Pope, really poorly taken. So that could have been 2 goals by Toney by the 27th minute. Both of them didn't count. But then in the 45th minute, believe it or not, Isak slightly fouls a Brentford player in the box, and another penalty is given to Brentford. But this time, Toney learned from his mistakes, finally puts it in the back of the net, and it counted, but with much more pace on it this time, and put it further into the far corner the way a PK should be taken, and Brentford goes up 1-0. Newcastle has basically no chances the entire first half, but to start the second half, Joelinton, with a terrific effort to juke a defender, then strike it through Reyes' legs into the goal. They called it an own goal, but really, I'm not sure how you do that. I mean, that was all Joelinton. Very nice goal to tie it at 1-1. And then 7 minutes later, a clinical finish by Alexander Isak, the Swede, who is in tremendous form, as mentioned on previous podcasts. A one-timer from outside the box in the corner, a thing of beauty. And then later, Callum Wilson put in a third, but that was overturned from a handball as he was trying to control the ball. And this was really a tale of two halves. Brentford was on the front foot the entire first half, and then Newcastle was on the front foot the entire second half. And oddly enough, it was all on the same side of the goal, same side of the field. There was just one goal getting all the love, one half of the field getting all the love. It was that field with the sun, a side of the field with the sun. It was very bizarre, very bizarre. But this game finished 2-1, Newcastle, but could have easily been a much higher scoring game. As mentioned, Ivan Toney could have had a hat trick in this one, and Brentford blew 2 sure goals in the first half, and as I mentioned with Toney, and then so did Newcastle in the second half. They blew an extra 2 goals. Of course, Callum Wilson and another one they blew as well. Could have been a much higher scoring game, but Newcastle takes this one. Newcastle very much so threatening to play European football next year, in the top 5, I believe now, 5 or 6. They're doing well. Brentford, still an impressive side, but Toney, you can't be missing PKs like that. Moving on to West Ham defeating Fulham 1-0. And I'm going to keep saying it. Mitrovic now is, I'm not sure when they did it, but they extended his suspension from 3 games to 8 games. And they are really, really missing this guy. They're a much less potent team without Mitrovic, and this team simply cannot score. Carlos Vinicius, Willian, all these guys, they have, even this guy Solomon, who had a streak of some lucky goals in there. This is a team that can't score without Mitrovic. And on the West Ham side, putting Cresswell and Soufal back as the attacking defenders for West Ham was a great move. And it's how it's meant to be, and allowed them to secure the clean sheet in this one. Those were their 2 stalwarts last year when they did really well in the league. And if they want to stave off relegation this year, you got to keep Cresswell and Soufal as your attacking defenders. In the 23rd minute, for Fulham, Reed, the defender, with the own goal, assisted by the work of Jared Bowen, and that was the only goal of this game. It was just an own goal. On the Fulham side, Anthony Robinson has another tremendous chance on goal for a second week in a row, or maybe a third, and he might be their best attacking player. And he's a damn defender. And another defender of theirs, a central defender, Tosin, had several chances, and he as well is a defender. This is a team now relying on defenders for their best chance to score in these games. you know, going back to the West Ham side, Ings had a good chance in the 56th minute, but nothing. And I feel like Ings has played for three teams this year already. Um, was it, what did he start with? Aston Villa or Southampton? And now he's in West Ham. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this year he's played for three different sides. But Mikel Antonio had another great chance in the 83rd minute. But Maxwell Cornet, I mean, you guys got to check out this one. He had a sure chance on goal in the final minutes of stoppage time after a terrible defensive mistake. And Bernd Leno continues to show his class, as always, somehow stopping this breakaway. You got to see this one. He absolutely bottled this, Cornet did. But Leno is a tremendous, tremendous keeper. Continues to show his class. These games could be 5-6-0. He's keeping it to one, maybe 2 goals sometimes. And Kenny Tete, one of my favorites on Fulham on defense, sadly might have lost his job to Cedric Suarez. He didn't start for the first time in a long time in this one, and then he came on with maybe 20 minutes left and made a terrible mistake, giving the ball to Ben Rama, who also almost scored for them, but Leno stopped the chance there again. For West Ham, this is only their second away win of the season, first since August. And, this is a good team that's been massively underperforming. Uh, and they're digging themselves, out of the relegation zone at this point. But if you look at the players on this team, these are mostly players that were unchanged from last year's really successful team. I believe that team maybe finished in the top 5 or at least the top 7. So as they start to get things together, I've seen interviews with David Moyes, and he seems like a very poised coach. I was, I hadn't heard him speak, and when I heard him speak and just kind of heard the calm in his voice, I have hopes that, I have I don't think West Ham is going to be relegated. I think they're one of the teams that are going to find their way out of this one. So West Ham find a way to win this one 1-0 on an own goal, and Fulham are very lucky that they had a hot start this year, because without Mitrovic, nothing good is going to happen for this team. They just simply can't score. They have no offense. Moving on to the next one. One of my favorite teams, Bournemouth, beats Leicester 1-0. Philip Billing, fantastic set piece, top corner to start the first 5 minutes. It just went wide, but then Billing again in the 24th minute, forcing a great save by the keeper. And then Solanke, a solid chance, went wide a few minutes later. Bournemouth was absolutely peppering Leicester with shots early in this first half. But then our boy Philip Billing finally got a well-deserved goal in the 40th minute here. It was a mistake by Leicester. James Maddison, of all people, a terrible back pass that Billing stole and knocked in, and it was a very well-deserved goal. This guy lately has been on a tear. Maybe going back the past 6 games, if you remember, Philip Billing scored at the beginning of one of those games in the first minute, and he has a nose for the goal. I scouted this guy very early in the year as a guy that was going to be one of the best midfielders, attacking midfielders in the league. And for a long time, he wasn't really showing it, but now he is finally showing it. It's coming together. They have Tavernier back. They have Solanke, who at least puts shots on goal. Sometimes he's not very clinical. And then, Django Watara, I think, also is a great addition to this team. But anyway, moving back to this specific game, for Leicester, Harvey Barnes and Castagna had a couple weak chances in the first half. I am still a big fan of Harvey Barnes. I think that guy just puts shots on goal. When you do that, eventually it goes in. But for him, he's just having a very unlucky season. I think if Leicester gets relegated, I hope somebody takes Harvey Barnes because he deserves to always be in the Premier League. And then again, Philip Billing to Dominic Solanke to start the second half. They were the driving force on offense the entire game in this one. And Tavernier also came on late and had a chance, but um, I don't know when they're going to take off the gloves for him. I know he was out for a long time. They're playing the long game for him. I think he only played 40 minutes in this game, and it was enough to get the win, but it was a very slight margin. It was only 1-0 here to a bad team. So eventually you're going to have to get Tavernier more minutes so he can get a rhythm, so he can start scoring the goals that he's so adept at doing. And then the final note here for Leicester, Patson Daka coming in the second half got Leicester going a little bit. But this is a team that was so reliant on Jamie Vardy being a clinical finisher over the years, and he just isn't that anymore. And Leicester is in serious peril for relegation. I think they're firmly in the relegation zone now. I believe they're 18th or so. So they really need to get it going. They need to find something. A lot of these guys that they have on offense, between Vardy and Iheanacho and Daka, I mean, they're real stars on this team, to be honest with you, are their midfielders, Madison and Harvey Barnes. I think this is one of those teams that does have some talent, but the finishing is just not there. And when you don't have that, that's a recipe for disaster. So, as I take a sip of water here, it's bad news for Leicester. But on the other end, I'm a big fan of Bournemouth. I think they're going to continue to do well. Their keeper Neto, I think he's okay. He's good enough. He had a clean sheet in this one. But that offense, those attacking mids and those forwards, I'm a big fan of. So I look forward to them continuing to play together this year, and then also next year. I think they're going to stay in the Premier League. So I'm looking forward to them, especially next year. Next game here, Tottenham defeat Brighton 2-1. I think some people are starting to question the replacement of Sanchez with Steele. People are starting to wonder whether it was a good idea. He conceded another 2 goals in this game. His form hasn't been great. I think his value is as a guy that actually passes well out of his goal. But as far as a keeper here, hasn't been tremendous. I think now in the past couple games he's conceded 5 goals, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But really, one of the stories of this week came in the 10th minute here. An incredible goal by Heung-Min's son. A curving shot, top corner from outside the box. It is one of the ones that you have to watch live. It was the absolute goal of the week and one of the best goals of the season. So when you get a chance, you got to watch that goal. Matoma equalized a few minutes later, but it was deemed a handball in the gather. And then later, McAllister and Caicedo had consecutive great chances, both forcing incredible saves by Lloris. I mean, that was another. This was a hell of a game for Lloris. I mean, I think this might have been his first or second game back from injury or whatever, suspension. I'm not sure what he was coming back from, but 2 incredible saves by this guy. I mean, some of these Spurs guys had amazing games today. And speaking of McAllister, this is a guy that might not be on Brighton for much longer. Some of the top clubs are trying to steal this guy away. He is a great player. He has been the captain of this team. He's taken PKs. He plays great on defense, plays great on offense. He's having an absolutely great season, in addition to being a World Cup champion now, the Argentine, the Irish Argentine. And then for Brighton, Dunk took over the game for about 5 minutes. He first stopped a sure chance on defense with a great sliding stop, and then headed in a beautiful header on offense off a Solly March set piece, and it was his game for 5 minutes. So he put them up here 1-0, or tied the game 1-1. Um, and then Solly March and Porro had consecutive chances on either side to close out the first half. Porro, as I've mentioned before, is a fantastic attacking defender for Spurs. I think he continues to get great chances. And then to start the second half, Danny Welbeck put in a strike to go ahead, but got unlucky, hitting his teammate McAllister on the hand. So unfortunately, that was called off due to a handball. So it was still 1-1. Interesting, in the 58th minute of this game, a fight broke out on the touchline between both coaches, or um, well, it was building up from earlier. Both managers were shown red cards and ejected, but it was very strange because the Spurs manager wasn't involved at all, but his assistants were, and he was penalized for that. The Brighton manager was chirping all game and absolutely deserved to be tossed, but the Spurs manager was doing nothing. He was minding his own business, and he got ejected as the head of his assistant. So he's going to have a stern talking to. I'm sure he already has with his assistants, so they don't get him kicked out of the game again. Harry Kane here in the 79th minute, absolute beauty just inside the box for the game winner to put him up 2-1. Perisic, after he had scored, tackled him American football style in celebration. And this was a raucous Spurs crowd. They play in a beautiful stadium with fantastic acoustics. Um, the hot toddy in that Tottenham stadium. So good on Tottenham to eke this one out. This was a very great competitive game. Tottenham and Brighton are two of the top teams in the Premier League. It was a very entertaining game to watch. Who would have known what would have happened if the manager stayed in for the last 30 minutes of this game, but they were both kicked out. And kudos to Tottenham, but Brighton is right up there at their skill level. To be honest with you, they had a disallowed goal or two, and if not for that, they could have won this game. Next one here, a pretty surprising outcome. Wolves defeat Chelsea 1-0. My first note on this one, because I mentioned Sarabia in early podcasts, he's been relegated to the bench after a big rise, and now he is taking a big fall. So the rise and fall of Sarabia has been interesting to monitor here. And Conor Gallagher on the Chelsea side finally starts for this side for the first time all season, it seems, or as far as I know. This guy was the star for Crystal Palace last year, and he's been a bench warmer all year. Going back to the Wolf side here in the 32nd minute, a rocket, absolute rocket from Matheus Nunes. What a beautiful strike this was. At top speed from a difficult side angle. It was so beautiful that his teammate Cunha had his hands behind his head in shock, standing in front of the goal. And I have to say, this was, after Son's goal, this was the second best goal of the week. This is another goal that you must watch highlights of. This was an absolute beauty. I didn't know Nunes was capable of this type of stuff, but tremendous goal. Diego Costa had another chance shortly thereafter, but it was terribly clumsy. And I have to admit, it's strange to see him in this form when he used to be a superstar force in this league. Going back to Chelsea here, Joao Felix continued his trend of strikes on goal that don't go in. Was also theatrical a couple times, going down in agony off of some soft challenges. And then Cucurella, a cynical tackle that went in with both legs. You just can't do that, and so he got a yellow card there. And Chelsea, even with Aubameyang back and all those big signings, Chelsea couldn't put anything away. The 85th minute, Pulisic got pushed in the box, but the PK wasn't given. There was a chance it could have been there, but it wasn't. And then there was another poor call against the Wolf striker Huang in the 89th minute. Otherwise, it would have been easily a 2-0 win by Wolves here. And that was it. Not much action in this one, but a huge win for Wolves over Chelsea in this one. As Chelsea's season from hell just continues. They just lost again to Real Madrid. It looks like that was their saving grace of the year, being in the Champions League, but it doesn't look like they're going to be in there for much longer. And actually, 2-0 was actually, I thought they were going to lose 10-0, to be honest with you. This team is really foundering. They can't score. And this is a team that just brought in now Frank Lampard, one of their former stars, to be their manager. And it didn't change anything. I mean, it's only been a week, but they're still suffering from the same things here. They can't score. They have some good players, but it's just not the finishing isn't there. It's perplexing. But big win for Wolves. They're another team fighting to stay alive, fighting to stay in this league. Chelsea drops out of the top 10. They're in 11th now. We'll see if they continue to drop. It's going to be interesting to monitor Chelsea, to be honest with you, as they now enter the bottom of the table. But we would go from the bottom of the table to the top of the table, and then maybe to the back to the bottom of the table. Manchester City defeating Southampton 4-1. This is teams that are on opposite ends of the table here. Manchester City just leaps and bounds better in this game. They look so sharp, and they often make their opponents look like they're in a lower league. On the Southampton side, Sulemana had an early fantastic run, stealing the ball from KDB and being clear with just Ake to beat. But Nathan Ake, great effort to keep up with Sulemana and caused a heavy touch, preventing him from a scoring opportunity. This was it could have been a sure goal. It was literally just one-on-one in that entire half of the field, Sulemana and Ake. He had another chance later. He was attacking the goal, but he lacks finishing. You know, when you look at Southampton, they are in the bottom right now. They are the 20th place team. You look at this team, it's really a lot of mediocre finishers. Che Adams last year, I guess, played second fiddle to Danny Ings, but he hasn't been playing a lot, and he's regressed. This guy Alcaraz, he showed spurts of having some class, but he's just not a fully developed player. And then Sulemana, I think, is the best overall player on this team, but he lacks finishing. He's another guy like Alcaraz. These guys just don't have that final move to be able to score. And I fear that when I look at this team, this is one that is absolutely destined for relegation. And when they do get relegated, I hope that James Ward-Prowse is able to still play in the Premier League, because he is a fantastic player, one of the best free kick takers I've ever seen. Manchester City side, a cakewalk in this one. Erling Haaland, of course, breaks the draw to end the first half with a casual header finish. The second goal then came from Grealish, rebounding his own shot off Bazunu, first with his left foot and then with his right foot. And then the third goal, an absolute beauty. Haaland with a casual scissor kick with his left foot. Absolutely brilliant, world-class player in a world-class moment. This guy continues to deliver, and he did so also in the Champions League against Bayern. And then for the Southampton side, a guy named Mara comes in for Sulemana and scores immediately. And I hadn't previously heard about this guy, but it was a very nice one-time finish. And this is a guy that seems to have some skill. And on a team that's reaching to find anything, I think they should perhaps start Mara next game in search of a spark. Finishing off this game, the fourth goal was a PK. tucked away by Julian Alvarez, who was subbed on for Holland. And as I say it every week, this team is embarrassment of riches. And they finished this one off 4-1. These teams are at polar opposites of the standings here. As we'll see a little bit later, Manchester City continues to keep the heat on Arsenal. I mean, this is not over. I believe there are still 8 game weeks left, and Manchester City is not out of it. So we'll see. But Southampton, if I'm you, start Mara next game. See if anything can happen. See if there's a spark. Moving on to the first game from Sunday, Crystal Palace defeating Leeds 5-1 in a shocking scoreline if you follow Crystal Palace. An interesting note about Palace here, maybe I have been following the EPL for a bit, but they had an almost entirely black lineup, which I don't know that I've ever seen before. I think 8 out of the 11 players, maybe 9 of the 11 players were black, and I don't see that often in the EPL, so that was kind of cool to see. Leeds started on the front foot on this one. They had 3 big chances in the first 20 minutes, including a fancy flick attempt by Aronson, but it was saved by the goal. But then later, Patrick Bamford with a extremely nice angular header. Bamford hasn't seemed to have played many full 90s this year, which is why he only has 3 goals in this campaign. But he should be getting more playing time as he continues to get healthy. And Jack Harrison, again, had an impact on this game as he does every game. A great free kick in the 29th minute here, just barely saved by Johnston. In the first half hour, Palace had 2 chances with the exact same result, headers that went far right. But then Palace strike in the last minute of the first half. A fancy little flick by Guehi with great effort over the keeper's head. After another great set piece by Olise. He's low-key a tremendous set piece man. He is one of the best in the league. That is his forte. And then going back to Leeds here, Patrick Bamford, an embarrassing dive to start the second half, causing a yellow for a Palace defender, and it's something that, if you know me, you know I hate the diving, and especially when they result in trickery and getting yellow cards for the guy that had perpetuated the so-called foul. And it was so bad, it felt like the barrage of 4 goals from Palace thereafter came as karma for that dive. And so the 4 more Palace goals came starting from Jordan Ayew. Jordan Ayew, ladies and gentlemen, who's been really poor for a couple seasons now, but made a nice header for that first goal of his. And then Eze, a minute later, had the next, which came from another assist from Olise here. And then Edouard had the next, and Olise again involved. And after this goal, for the first time in a long time, I saw him show emotion, and he jumped on Edouard's back while belting a celebratory yell. And a few minutes later, believe it or not, Jordan Ayew scored his second goal. Jordan Ayew with a brace. Who would have thunk it? And this rose his season total to 3 goals. So 66% of his goals came in this game. This was the game of his life. He kept looking to the heavens in celebration. And it was a sight to see. Good for Jordan Ayew. I haven't been a fan of his. I've been avoiding him for the last 2 years in fantasy EPL, but to see him have his moments, great for Ayew. Great to see it. And as mentioned before, I'm a big fan of the way Olise plays. He plays through contact, and he doesn't dive very much. And he did it often in the second half here, and look what it resulted in. He had a tremendous game. If you play EPL on Fantrax, I believe he had 41 points in this one. He was heavily involved in scoring and scoring opportunities for this team. So Olise, tremendous game by you. Crystal Palace, what a game. We've all been waiting to see this from this team. They have a lot of kind of mid-level strikers, and this was a game without Zaha. But well done. That 5-goal barrage, I did not expect that at all. I don't know that I've ever seen that from Palace. And meanwhile, Leeds on the other side, you concede 4 goals. Bamford, that was embarrassing. After that goal you scored to dive like that, you're better than that, bro. And Leeds, another team fighting against relegation. We'll see. I mean, their player is Jack Harrison. That is their guy. But Bamford, you got to get him for full 90s. But, dude, you can't keep diving like that. Or else, you might be causing your team a chance to stay in the EPL. But the final game of the week, and perhaps the best and most compelling one, Liverpool and Arsenal drew 2-2. Jurgen Klopp finally came back to his senses, and this game, after that benching of Salah and Trent and many others as disciplinary action for their previous game, what a dumb move that was, as they didn't score a goal that day against Chelsea. Finally coming back to his senses in this one and starting Salah and Trent and their best guys. On the Arsenal side, Gabriel Martinelli struck early here, the 8th minute. Van Dijk directly at fault in this one. He passed it right to Martinelli and gifted him that goal. And then the offensive defender, Zinchenko, had a good shot on goal early. Didn't get it in. And then Jesus had another chance thereafter. And it was such a close chance that it caused the announcer to yell, "Jesus!" And I wasn't looking at the screen. I was like, what happened? And I was like, oh, it was Jesus that had a shot on goal. For the Liverpool side, Robertson offered the best chance of the team 20 minutes in. But then a few minutes later, Martinelli to Jesus, the Brazilian connection, put Arsenal up 2-0. And it looked like they were off to the races in this one, scoring a couple goals in the first half hour. But then in the 40th minute, Granit Xhaka, that little hothead, got upset. The ball was taken away from him, and then he took revenge on Trent. Just a really poor, cynical tackle and push, which caused some pushing and shoving. Both of those players got yellow cards, but Xhaka was in the wrong for that late challenge. It was just kind of dirty and petty. And that's the best thing that could have happened to Liverpool. This caused them to wake up, because a minute later, a great little move by Curtis Jones, of all people, started the attack, which led to a Salah goal. And then they almost had another in stoppage time in the first half, but it flew over the net. So they got back one of the goals. And then something really, really terrible happened. There was a weak PK that was awarded to Liverpool, and then karma came around. Salah missed yet another penalty. He missed one a couple weeks ago against Bournemouth. And Salah, this is really, really unacceptable. I hate to see him perform in this way, because I know that if he keeps doing this, they're going to take away those penalties from him. And it's tough to see him have kind of a subpar year, because I know he's capable of great things, but he has not been in his top form this year. This PK wasn't even on target. It was just wide to the left. And Salah had more chances. He tried to make up for it, and he had more key passes later in this game after that. But you absolutely cannot miss PKs. He's going to have to show himself worthy of being the PK taker for this team. And he's just going to have to step it up in every way on offense as a leader. He needs to be better. I have to concede that. Even though he is my favorite player in this league, fellow countryman, Salah needs to be better. Can't be missing PKs like that. Um, but then as this game continued to progress in the 87th minute, some great fancy footwork by Trent nutmegging Zinchenko and then lifted it to Firmino for the game tying header. Trent had a great game on offense in this one. And for Arsenal, likewise, Ramsdale had a number of tremendous game-saving saves in stoppage time to save this from being much worse than just 2-2. This was a game that was the reverse of what Arsenal usually do. They're usually very slow starters and they come back and score a lot of goals. This was the opposite of that. They scored their first 2 goals early and then really almost lost this one. Ramsdale saved them in the last 60 minutes of the game. And it was similar. It was similarly strange because Liverpool is the opposite. They are usually very fast starters and then they give up. But Xhaka is massively to blame in this one. So is Zinchenko for waking up Liverpool with that pushing match. So Arsenal, they tied, but they still get 1 point. They could have conceded. They could have gotten no points. But Manchester City is hot on their tails. For Liverpool, a great showing here. I didn't think they would show up in this way. And that second half, a tremendous showing of heart. You know, every once in a while you see glimpses of that old Liverpool team. It's like, you know, when like somebody is like on their decline, and every so often they'll show you that they are they'll show you that superstar class from old. You know, 7-0 against Manchester United, coming here and almost beating Arsenal, tying them up 2-2, and then at the end of the game, that flurry that almost won them the game. They have that, but then they'll go and they'll lose to Bournemouth and all these other teams. So, this is I don't know that Liverpool is the most inconsistent team because they have high highs and low lows. So they will be in the Premier League next year. They probably won't be playing in Europe. For Arsenal, they still have the lead, but they're going to have to watch out for Manchester City. We'll see what happens for the rest of the season. So that, ladies and gentlemen, brings this Game Week 30 reaction show to a close. I want to thank you all for tuning in and enjoying, hopefully, this podcast. Remind you again, if you stuck around this long, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think, let me know your opinions, like, share, and if you're listening, especially on Spotify to the podcast version, the first thing I want you to do, please go ahead and hit that follow button. It really helps us a lot. And then if you enjoyed it, give us a rating, and all the other ones. I know that there are a lot of folks that listen on Amazon Music and Pandora and Stitcher and Apple, and some on iHeartRadio. I see some of the statistics as well. A lot of people are listening primarily, I know, in the United States, but there's a ton that are listening from the UK and Ireland and France and Saudi and Bahrain. And there are listeners from about 20, 25 countries I see that are tuning in. I really appreciate you guys. Belgium and Italy and Colombia and Portugal and Hong Kong. And I see all those places that people are listening from, so I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Go ahead and follow, engage. And if you're on Twitter or Instagram, we're on there as well. You can find us on there, Football v Football Podcast. So thank you all again. I want to really appreciate your listenership or your watchership. And until the next one, have a fantastic day, football fans.